there has been so many things in my life that has happened to me and for me that I'm like, that's God. Like, that is God. And that's because I've been able to see something happen and just know and have that feeling and all of that. So, like, moving based on our morals and values is definitely where that integrity piece comes in too, of like, this is our direction, and how we're going to move about it. So, also to that, add that in.
Welcome to the Moxie Podcast. I am so thrilled to be in a new month because this month we are talking about kind of the behind the scenes and the why of podcast. And we've never gone this angle, but there are entrepreneurs and people and hosts that run these podcasts that it takes a lot of work. There's so much behind the scenes. It's not just showing up and talking, although that's our favorite part to do. But there's a reason why we wanted to get our voice out into the sound waves to you. And there's a reason why we want to collectively create a community. And so I wanted to spend this whole month talking about that why. And I'm so pumped that we get to start September with just, I'm going to say y'all are now my new good friends and will be forever, Mandy and Brittany with Empowered Podcast. And I'm just so thrilled that you can join me today in our community.
Thank you, Jenny. We are super excited. And honestly, I'm glad that you said some good friends, because now you're stuck with us and you can't go anywhere either. So happy to be here and happy to be connected forever.
We'll be in Kenya in 2025. Just there into the ether now.
I'm counting on that. Then we'll do like a live podcast. It will be a whole thing. I'm all about putting out that vision. So I'm here for it. Yeah. I had already said off the mic that we have an open door policy. I think I tell everybody on the podcast, like, call me up if you're ever in East Africa. Only a few people have actually taken that, but it's always an open invitation for sure.
It's just a skip, hop, and a jump over. It's okay. It's not that far.
Yeah, just like 20 hours. No big deal. I'm so excited that you guys have jumped into the podcast and just that we've been able to communicate ahead of time and finally get something on the calendar to talk. But I wanted to really start, and either one of you can start, of the why of Empowered. I know this launched this year, and so getting the stories out there, it's been a joy to just listen and see how it's developed just over the last couple of months. So would love to hear a little bit. Maybe we can start with just, if you want to start with your backgrounds of a little bit getting to, okay, we're going to sit on a couch, we're going to create a community, and we're going to start Empowered. So whoever wants to start that off, would love to hear a little bit of that background and why.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
So it's been a vision of mine for at least 3 years or so. I literally, I was on the phone with my dad one day and was like, I want to start a podcast. I want to do something meaningful. I want to do something impactful. And I want it to be meaningful and impactful for women. And so fast forward, life kind of happens and you're always like, not the right time, not the right time. You put it off, you back burner it. And it just kept sitting on me. And I was like, when am I going to do this? And we fast forward, I'm going through some really big life changes and I start a new job and I am sitting next to Miss Brittany Mills. The two of us are sitting there and we're hip and hip, our jobs are just kind of coincided. And it was so beautiful. Immediately, wait a minute, we have a lot of connections. We're really well connected. We just have an energy that just flows together. And it felt like in a matter of 2 months that we had known each other forever. And so we keep talking and we're talking about childhood trauma, right? With your colleagues, you're normally like, oh, what did you bring for lunch? What did you do this weekend? I'm like, oh, I struggled with this. And she's like, oh, me too. That's crazy. That's insane. And we start having these conversations and we get moved to a secluded area where it's just the two of us, which terrible idea on somebody's front. Who thought that was a good idea? We're not going to get anything done. And we start literally having these conversations and we're like, well, that would be a good podcast idea. That would be a good podcast idea. And I had shared with Brittany, hey, I really want to do this. And I kept saying it, but we weren't moving forward. And she looked at me one day and she was like, if you really want to do this, we can do this. She was like, let's do it. She's like, you start it, make it happen. And I quote, I could literally talk to a wall. I'm in. It was just and I was like,
and it is true.
And it's true. And so we did it. We started it and we said, okay, let's just start recording. Let's see where it goes. And we both bonded over this idea of like wanting to do better and be better. So we're having these hard conversations between each other. And I'm like, there has to be other women out there who want to have these hard conversations. There has to be other women who want to do better, be better, really break cycles. It's a big thing that we both have in common is that we're breaking a lot of really unhealthy cycles that's going to impact generations to come. And we are both thrilled about that. And I'm like, we can't be the only ones. And nobody, like, at least in our age group and the people we're around, often aren't talking about these things openly. You don't go to events and get to discuss your trauma or the things that are really truly weighing on you. You go and you talk about, like, oh, wow, I'm doing all these wonderful, great things. But nobody pulls back the curtain and says, like, hey, I'm struggling with this. Let's struggle together. Or how did you get through this? So the whole idea and goal of this podcast is to pull back the curtain a little bit and create a community of women who want to struggle through the things together, move through them together, and help uplift others. So if you've overcome a cycle, you can reach down, pick somebody up, and help them overcome as well.
That's so
and
good.
that is why we're business partners, because can you top that?
Yeah.
Not at all. Not at all.
Yeah. I'm curious, like, if you want to talk through some of like those cycles. So it's not really a side thing. It's kind of a full thing too, but I teach in a social work division. And so we talk a lot about trauma. We talk a lot about adverse childhood experiences. We talk a lot about just, I also come from a broken family of parents getting divorced when I was 16 and working through alcoholism and all of those things, and then having to overcome that. And then obviously in our day-to-day life of what we do, we see consistent generational cycles of things that we are trying to break as well. So I'd be curious, like some of maybe I'm curious if there's like, okay, we were thinking of maybe these types of cycles that were like, man, we want to talk really in depth of this, but then has there been other things that have come up already where you're like, whoa, I didn't even think we were going to touch on this, and this, just kind of that journey.
Yeah, I definitely think so. There's a lot of pieces to our podcast. And like Mandy was saying, when we first brought it up, it's like we were just continuously bringing up these things, just simply talking about life. And we were like, wait, we could talk about that. We could talk about this. We could also talk about that. And it came to the point where like we're sharing so many commonalities where, like, just like Mandy said, there has to be other women. Like, we're not the only two women in this world that are experiencing these things. So why not let's create a community where they feel safe, where they feel heard, where they feel seen, and be able to work with us rather than us teaching them just directly to them. So I think Mandy and I really speaking on that why is that we are also growing. We're also correcting. We're also learning healthy habits, breaking those cycles, breaking barriers. And so we're pushing forward with our community. And it's like we're just like wanting to grab more hands to bring them with us rather than looking at them and directing them. But I know when, starting the podcast, we're like, okay, well, we can talk about at first, like, what brought us to Charlotte and how our life has just gotten us here. But then on our very first live podcast, we instantly ripped the Band-Aid off and we're talking about childhood trauma. I too struggle with my dad. He passed away when I was 5 years old from alcoholism. And so I relate to you, Jenny, with that as well. And so we talk about things such as addiction. We also just recently did a podcast where we're talking about childhood abuse. And so there are these things that are coming in and they're new topics, but there's so many different individuals that are experiencing things that we're able to talk about and nurture and be able to move forward with them.
Yeah, no, that's good. I think, when you open that door, it can go, well, I find that it allows people to, again, be vulnerable and open up to. And so that is such a beautiful, not just why, but beautiful direction to give this platform, for people to be like, it's okay. I am a person that's not surface level. So I feel like anytime I like meet someone, I'm like, and I want to know everything about you. And if I'm too much in your business, then this is probably not going to work because I want to know everything about you. So it's actually been it's been interesting when I've met, and this might also be, I went to Kenya when I was really young. So I started traveling when I was 18 and then moved there when I was 21. So I think if I would have also stayed in Texas and kind of in that South, I think my life would be a little bit different and feeling that breaking through that barrier to be a little bit harder. And so I'd be curious on cultures too. You said coming to Charlotte. Are you guys from like Charlotte originally, or how did coming to the city, and then how did that change? And just curious if you've seen it different in other cultures, or because I know in my family, we don't talk about hard things. So it's like my family culture is like, yeah, you achieve, you do these things, like you make your accolades, like you have a certain order. And I was wild and I broke everything, did not go in order. So I had to work through all of those things with them. And I remember the first time I sat down with my dad, it was like 5 years ago, and we finally talked about divorce. And my parents, my stepdad passed away last year, but and he was amazing. And my parents both got remarried, but talking through that as a 16-year-old and what I had to go through as a 16-year-old, and, working through my parents' issues. And I had to figure out, I wrote a book and had to figure out how to write it in that book too, of like how to respect, all the parties involved. But I was sitting down with my dad and I was like, why did you not make this decision for me, or this decision for me? And it was the first time we ever like had I feel like a hard conversation, but a beautiful conversation. And ever since then, it's been like such a different relationship with him, this like healing. And I wish I knew, or I wish I would have been brave or courageous enough earlier to have that conversation with my dad and just like, okay, we're going to talk through this. But I'm curious on your culture too, or your family background and other things for both of you. Like, is that something that you are extremely comfortable with now, of like, okay, especially now running Empowered, of like, we're going to have all these hard conversations? Or was it a progression growing into that? Because I feel for me, it was a little bit of a flip overnight because of Kenya has such a relational culture. Like you just always are really in each other's business. And then when I came back, I was in everybody's business. But I feel that I think it also took some time too, to like be confident in who I was as well, to have those conversations too.
So
go ahead.
neither of us are from Charlotte. I ventured all the way from Vermont to Charlotte. So I probably had bigger culture shock, whereas Brittany is like, she's in my Southern belle, like this is her space. But coming from a family space, like a lot of my trauma resonated from not being able to speak about the things, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I grew up the child, my father struggled with alcoholism, and then I grew up the sibling of a heroin addict, and you don't speak about those things. And I moved to Charlotte when I was 20. I left everything. Like nobody gets out of my town. It's a very small town. Nobody does anything. Nobody leaves. Nobody gets out. And there was almost that like, oh, I'm going to get out of the small town and then I'm going to talk about the things. And that's daunting, right? Like that's terrifying. Nobody shares the things, and nobody says, hey, I'm going to do the things I want to do. I'm going to chase my dreams. I'm going to do that without the judgment and the like kind of shame of small town. So it, like you, similar, like flip overnight. Like I moved and was like, I'm starting a new life. I'm building a new life. I started going to therapy when I got here. And I just was like, I want something different. Like when you pull yourself out of a situation like that and really get distance, I think from a situation where communication isn't supported and encouraged on those things, then you can see like, oh, wow, that might not be what I want. I might want something different. And I very quickly was like, how do I create that? Like, oh, wow. Like the blinders come off. And so immediately like dove into it.
I think for myself, on the other hand, I had the opposite of you two, where my family, we talked about everything. But when I say everything, I mean everything. And so I saw a lot growing up, and I experienced a lot growing up. And so like yourself, Jenny, where you meet someone and you're all in their business and you're like talking about these random things and all this stuff, I find myself doing that a lot, and I feel comfortable doing so. But on the other hand, now that I'm still like learning and also creating all of these new healthy cycles, I'm looking back at my family. And by the way, I'm from Columbia, South Carolina. So small town, nothing really anything to brag about. But I'm having to go back and teach them things, and also my family that's from a different part of South Carolina, because the best way I can describe it is just small-minded. So things such as like boundaries and respect, and even like respect for others. And I'm like, hey, you have to pay attention to these things, culture, things of that nature, appreciating that. And I'm like, you need to be mindful of the other people around you, or mindful of what someone else is going through, or just like the way to communicate with someone. And so it's kind of like, I don't know, a double-ended sword. I was able to talk about my feelings and talk about everything because my mom and I, for instance, were so close, and like we were the only thing that each other had. But then now I'm having to go back to her and be like, hey, boundaries, like respect my boundaries. I have to respect yours. So yeah, just kind of all over the place.
Has anybody from your family listened to your podcast?
I haven't asked.
Okay.
I have not asked. They need to. But truthfully, we haven't dove extremely deep into the things that we plan to, and especially for what I plan to talk about, and like the things that I see, because like I said, Mandy and I are also growing and changing with our community too. And so each day I'm learning something new and learning something that I can kind of add to my bucket. And so I feel like the day that I truly just dive into it on the podcast, it's definitely not going to be a 45-minute one. It's going to probably be 2 hours or in multiple different parts. But yeah, we'll see if they take a listen.
Yeah, I had said some things about my family and I had no idea they listened. And then they were having a chat. They were having a chat about a solo podcast I did a couple years ago. And my dad texted me and was like, "We do not do that as a family." And I was like, "Oh, I was actually pretty much like, I was like, "Okay, great. We're actually, I didn't even know you guys were audience. So this is wonderful."
What a way to find out that they're listening.
Yeah, it was really you'll have to let me know when that time passes.
Absolutely.
And you get a text. Okay, I want to talk about something that's really important to me is values, and this aligns with our whys and our why. And when I do any coaching or when we talk to even our collective in Kenya, we always go back to like, and no matter what we do, whether that's even like a sale or that's a marketing collaboration or whatever, is it aligned to our values and does it make sense? And I feel like that's such a beautiful internal compass to saying good yeses and really good nos. And so I would love to know maybe y'all's top 5 values, whether that's personally and also as empowered, and what that means to you guys as you move forward in growing this platform and community.
So we have 4 values that we stand really strong in. And actually, it's funny, we had a conversation, I think it was probably 2 weeks ago, and we were making a decision, and it was a hard decision. And we actually went back and made a different decision because we said, hey, this doesn't align with our values if we were to do it this way. And it was like the most like grown up, evolved, like, hey, our gut said to do this, but when we check it against these values and the integrity of this company and this organization we're building, it doesn't align. Like it's not aligning with our vision. And I think the one, like, we're like, kindness is huge. So one of our values is kindness, authenticity, integrity, and vulnerability. So all things that like every episode should embody, but then like we are so important about being so intentional. So it's like not just speaking those values, but every single, like we analyze every decision to say, hey, does this align with the values? Because if we're aligning with those, we're building things in the way that we want to. I think we're both so mindful and aware that it's so easy to get off course from those things. And those are the things that, like, we both really resonated with and connected on. And it's like, if we're building an organization in that, imagine how beautiful it's going to be if that's the foundation and those are the roots. And like when we get up into the trees, like what is that going to look like if it's doing that for women everywhere and providing that?
I'm always leaving space. I normally don't interview 2 people at a time. So you guys are testing me out here. So I'm like,
that's okay.
I love that you just knew it right away. Cause I feel like, and that you already have an example, because I feel for a long time I ran our company with like, no, like I knew my values, but like with no kind of values that were said out loud. And we made a lot of not wrong choices, but it just felt so misaligned at the end, and coming back to being like, who are we? And knowing that it was connection and community and empowerment and this, like, again, authenticity that we wanted to embody. It just makes things easier and so much more, and you can move forward with so much clarity, and who you want, especially in a podcast, right? Who do you want to bring on the podcast? You guys, I'm sure, are already getting pitched like left and right. Like that's what happens when podcast thought leaders and people just come out of nowhere, and want to be on the podcast. And then you have to be like, is this the
Yeah.
best? Like it might
The
be a
hard
great
part on that
yeah.
is kindness is one of our values. So we're like,
What do we
what
do?
about this supersedes, like, I want to uplift every single woman out there. And I'm like, but if you're not embodying every single one, it's not kind to our audience and to ourselves to then display that. It's been hard.
Yeah.
And I think too, Jenny, you mentioned earlier about, your personal values, and Mandy and I think are very strong in our morals. I myself am a Christian. I believe in God, and that's something that I love to talk about and the way that I move in my day to day. And so we also too, with Mandy on herself, like she is strong in faith, and those pair so well together, and we're able to bring in so many different ways of life and mindsets, and like we bond over that. And then of course, like I see so much kindness in Mandy, and she somehow says the same in me, and I'm like, you're nicer than me, and she's like, no, you're nicer than me. But we really make sure to pay attention to that as well. And there has been so many things in my life that has happened to me and for me that I'm like, that's God. Like that is God. And that's because I've been able to see something happen and just know and have that feeling and all of that. So like moving based on our morals and values is definitely where that integrity piece comes in too, of like, this is our direction, and how we're going to move about it. So also to that, add that in.
Yeah. It's hard. So I don't run the podcast to like monetize it or to be a full-time thing. It's definitely a side thing, but seeing my friends who run it full time and all that takes, and just even what I've done too for marketing and stuff, you think about like, and I know that has to be a hard decision, because it's like, you want to be kind, you want to be authentic, you want to make sure you're vulnerable and that it's serving your community. And at the same time, there's a business side of like, okay, well, what networks is it going to get out to? And how's it going to leverage? But I love that y'all are starting now, because I was just having a conversation with a friend. She runs another business, and she just brought in a client that goes a little bit against her normal contract of clientele that she brings in. And she runs, it doesn't matter, but she brought in someone, and we were discussing it, and she's like, well, what do you feel? Because my gut feels a little weird about it, and I'm like, well, your business, that's word of mouth. And so now your network is going to expand to a different type of network, which is okay, but it's going to continue to skew and have a different angle every time that word of mouth goes out. And so that y'all are starting now is so beautiful, because it is so hard. But if that gets into a network, so if someone's going to be sharing that into a network that maybe isn't all of who you want to serve, I mean, it's so hard, because like you said, it circles back to being kind. And it's like, well, we want to share this with everybody. And you want to be curious, and you want to be open, and you want to be inclusive, and all those things. And at the same time, if you are so broad, it will wash out your mission and vision and your why, what you guys are trying to do. And so I say all that to applaud you for starting early as you're moving through this game, because, man, it will just make your community more stronger and more together, and better. So.
It's funny that you mentioned that. Actually, we were just talking about this last week. And we have been surrounding ourselves with people who are on the same mission and on the same direction. And a lot of our events have the same type of individuals, women. And we go to a new event and we're like, and just a little different vibe. And we were like, okay, well, no, this is good. This is good that we're, kind of differentiating a little bit, surrounding ourselves with some different people. And then Mandy looks at me and goes, it might be a good thing that we're just surrounded by the people that we know are on the same direction, have those same morals, have those same values, and just right there with us. So I agree completely.
Yeah. And I would say there's a lot of times, especially as women, and I think we're getting better at this. Like, I was talking to a friend the other day and she was giving a master class about women in the workplace and like in corporate workplaces. And one of her rules was really interesting, but I caught myself doing this. She said, remove just. And she's like when you're writing an email, like just wondering or just checking in or just, she's like, men never do that. They just say, hey, like, following up on this
What is
email
this?
or whatever, like they just call it out and we're just like, just thinking, like we add this like little, and I think the same thing goes with our intuition is sometimes we second guess ourselves when our intuition is so strong, and our gut and, or whatever our gut says, however the spirit's leading, it's like paying attention to that still small voice inside of us and being like, nope, like I'm going to go with this, and to not question it, and to be, because we're so much smarter than we realize. I think we don't give ourselves justice for that. Yeah.
I agree. I think, our intuition, it's not going to lead us in the wrong direction. Like that gut feeling is correct 99.9% of the time. But I just feel like human nature to second guess ourselves continuously until we convince ourselves otherwise from that initial gut feeling. And I think what we need to remind ourselves is like, hey, your body, your language, your mind, your everything has already told you the answer. Like, don't try to convince yourself otherwise.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So you guys have empowered. And now at this point, it's been a good 5 months, I think. Because podcast world, we record ahead, maybe 4 or 5 months. So one, I want you to tell everybody where they can find you, but two, I want to hear some things that you guys are excited about. Like you have the podcast, you talked a little bit about events. Like what are some things that you might have brewing that you can share that maybe are some goals that you have in the next year with Empowered and your community and all of it?
Beautiful. So I'm going to self-hype here. Neither of us are like, when it came to podcasting, we were like, we're building what we got. So the setup is so funny. It's minimal, it's minimalistic. Neither of us have ever built a podcast, built a website, anything of that sort. So our website is now up and running. It's Empowered Podcast. It links you to everything. We built everything in-house. We learned how to use Wix. We learned how to build a website. We learned all the things. So check that out.
And when she says let me give her extra flowers. Let me make sure that everyone is aware that it was Mandy Rogers herself. And so I want to make sure she's getting all the flowers because me and technology are like oil and water.
Not wrong. She's our social queen. I'm our like behind it's such a funny like husband and wife pairing. We always say like some days I'm the wife, some days I'm the husband, vice versa. We complete each other so well in these pieces. So our website includes all of our events. So if somebody's ever looking to find what's coming up, what's going on, we have all of our episodes, our events there. We're on Instagram as Empowered Pod, as well as TikTok, Facebook, LinkedIn. You can find us on every social media platform. We love engaging on Instagram. So if somebody slides into our DMs, has a question, wants to chat, anything like that, we get so excited. It's unreal. We're like, you want to talk with us? We want to talk with you. Like we're best friends now. Like that's it. We're stuck. And then as far as upcoming events go, we have some really fun things planned. So by the time this aired, we will have hopefully just completed a fun event with a local author, not a local New Jersey author, who's coming in to be with us and doing a big event with her. So we're over the moon thrilled to be partnering with our guests and getting them into Charlotte, which is amazing that our guests are coming into us. And then a couple other events. We have a big one planned for 2025 that we're putting out there. It's a kind of workshop day to come and get everything you need to either launch your business. So if you're trying to side hustle, build that entrepreneurship, and you are like, I have to work and grind Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. I don't have time to do this. And I don't know where to start. Our goal is that you leave that workshop having everything you need. So you'll talk with a tax professional, you'll talk with someone in accounting to help with all of that legal, how to set up your business, somebody on crafting a business plan, and then the same for those in our corporate friends. We love to appreciate them as well, and how to level up your career. So a combo day of like, hey, how do you get ahead? And so we're thrilled to be doing that in early 2025. And then our goal is an event every month. So if you're local to Charlotte, we are doing monthly events of some sort, and they're all meant to nourish your soul, nourish your heart. I know you mentioned like you don't like surface level interaction. We kept leaving events being like, we don't like surface level interaction. I am really introverted. So like Brittany has to go be our social butterfly. It's so bad. I feel like I'm like sending her out on a mission. She does so well, but I just like wallflower because the like kind of surface level interaction just drains me. I have to go stare at a wall for 3 days following. I've got to recharge. So we wanted to craft events where you come to this event, and even if you're introverted or if you're extroverted, you leave feeling recharged. So it's an event that's going to leave you feeling better and nourished.
I love it all. I love it so much. I have a lot of things I want to talk off the mic, but we're here and I'm excited. And all of this is going to be in the show notes. So you guys can find them on all the socials and obviously their website. Go check out the events. And did you mention, will you have most of it is in person, or do you also, besides the podcast, have anything virtual happening?
So those events that we were mentioning, yeah, those are going to be in person. Like I said, we're really, really big on like the community, and we want that face-to-face interaction. I feel like, in the years to come, though, it would be such a beautiful thing for us to have like a virtual gathering for those that are not local. So hopefully we'll also put that on the books too.
Also have on the 2025 roadmap to take this thing nationwide, and be hosting events around the country. So the goal is that we kind of really nail it with Charlotte, figure out what we're doing here, and then figure out how to replicate in other cities. So that way, if you are a listener and you really do enjoy it and you're like, hey, I want to go to an event that makes me feel good, it's not so much you have to fly into Charlotte to do it. Maybe it's local to your city.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I love how you guys started, because it's just like, just start, just do it. Like you had been thinking about it, and it's just like, just put the first step ahead, because exactly like, and just say it out loud, like nationwide, to get that going. But to do it well in one place, I think sometimes we see big as in numbers, and actually quality is so much better sometimes over quantity. So I'm sure even those in-person events, whether small, mid-size, or big, are just really beautiful because of the engagement, the relationships being made. That's definitely the hard part of obviously the virtual space. Like we're looking at each other. You have no idea how tall I am. I might have some weird legs. I don't know. Have you ever met people where all you know them is virtually for like 2 years? And then I'm like, I didn't know how tall you were. This is crazy.
Right.
Yeah, no, but I think in person is definitely the way to go. And I'm just excited for you guys, especially the conversations that you're having within the podcast. I think it's going to allow people to know that it's okay and set those standards of healing and what that looks like for women all over the world. So really, really excited. As we circle our time together, because we could talk for hours, I just love to leave our community with one last thing to live by. So some nuggets of wisdom or encouragement that you want to share with them. And so I would love for both of you to share, and we can start with Mandy of what's one last thing to live by, and then end with Brittany.
So I really started my year with nothing that's meant for you will miss you. I think that really helps me on the like redirection from the nose, and knowing that like I'm going to always be living in my purpose. And then if something is meant for me, like it's going to happen. So if something didn't happen, I'm going to be sad, give myself my 5 minutes to be sad. And then I'm going to move on, because there's probably something greater on the other side that's meant to happen for me.
That's good.
Yeah. And mine, I would say, is always try to find what fulfills you. A lot of times we always talk about, oh, well, what makes us happy? But I feel like happiness can kind of come and go. You're going to have hard days. You're going to have times where you do get your feelings hurt or things don't go too successful. However, if you're looking for fulfillment and you're filling your cup up and being fulfilled in the things that you do, even on those hard days, I think then that will flow into other people as well, and more into the things that you're like wanting to strive for and be the person that you're wanting to be. So always try to strive for fulfillment.
So good. Thank you guys so much for joining Moxie and our community here. And we will definitely stay in touch. I expect you guys in 2025 worldwide. We'll do an event.
Love that. Kenya is your friend. That's what we're
Yes.
going for.
That'll be our
Exactly.
first stop.
Exactly. I'll take you on safari, show you around Mombasa. We're right on the beach. It's really beautiful. But it's a thrill to have you guys here and just to get to know you, and excited to, again, stay connected. But as we say here at Moxie, just keep moxieing on. I don't know if moxieing on is a actual verb, but keep moxieing on. Yeah.
I want to add it to the dictionary.
Exactly. So Moxie on, friends. We'll see you next week. And as always, thank you for being part of this community.